Okay, item E on our agenda, public appearances. Are there any public appearances? And is Sue not?
She's coming.
She is coming. Okay. And then item F, the consent agenda, approval of the January 27th minutes, staff retirements and resignations, and gift donations and vouchers payable. Can I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I'm not going to make this motion because I don't want these people to retire.
So
I'll
records so
reflect.
Been moved and seconded. We'll count that. All in favor?
Aye.
Grudgingly.
All opposed?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
oh, Susan
The
did.
motion carries. If you would like to mention the people who are retiring?
Yeah, I was waiting for the recognition point. I just thought
Which
maybe
is where
that's
we're-
where to do it. Notice I didn't pull it off of the.
Yes, thank you.
But actually, I talked to Jake today. Both Jake Otwick and Sheila Hibner are teachers, high school teachers that we have that have submitted their retirement applications. And again, every teacher we have is special. And as Carrie was saying tonight, when you've had personal experiences with these people and you've seen what they've done in this district, it's impressive. And the career paths that Sheila has built for our students is incredible. And then Jake brought the first econ class to the school district. We did not have that class.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
and Sheila has given us 32 years with the Monona Grove School District, and Jake gave us 22 local years. So
Yeah.
I remember when he came, so I'm really old.
32.
32 and 22.
It's kind of my thought too. Yeah, they've both been very positive presences. Neither one of them were retirements I wanted to see, but you knew they were.
Dean?
I just like to say that when, this is dealing with Sheila's replacement, I think it's hard. I think she is probably, particularly her internship program, is probably one of the most positive outreach factors to not only the general community, but to the business community and so forth. And I think that's going to be hard to replace, and we need to proceed with it, I hope, and carefully hire there.
All right. Any additional recognitions?
Oh, well, we'll wait till we know all about the swim team. Oh, and I actually went to the basketball game on Saturday, and it was absolutely excellent, and Monona won, which was superbly played with Monroe. Yeah, a lot of penalties. Fouls. But they honored the class, the basketball class of 2006, which was second in the state championship in 2006. And so I just want to recognize that group. And it's pretty impressive that they do that kind of process. It was kind of like at the gala when they brought back the students that had been in some of the special productions. It's just really neat as you build a legacy, and it makes you rethink once again, as we look at recognition, ways to recognize alumni and staff in a special way, and how we want to do that.
All right, thank you. Do we have any additional correspondence and announcements?
I just have one announcement that maybe you already heard, that there was to be a hearing today by the Assembly Education Committee on the referendum bill, which apparently is still at 2 years, not 1 year. And there was also supposed to be one on the whole bathroom issue, high school bathroom issue, and that both of them got pulled off the agenda. They may come up again next week, or I think it seems likely they may not come up again before the end of the session, but there's still a lot of interest in them, so they probably will come up again next year. There's also, we've had Republican legislators actually say, well, we'll just put them in the budget bill, so they will be back, but for now they're not, at least they're not dealing. And this was on like 2 days' notice, they had this hearing. They did, I believe, hold a hearing on the voucher bill, but there may have been some amendments. There's a special needs voucher bill and another voucher bill that would affect districts like Racine, where if kids, well, other districts where if students leave your district to go to a voucher school, not only does their aid go with them, you lose your revenue authority equivalent to the amount also, which that's like a double whammy, so. And there apparently are some amendments to that, so I guess that one will stay tuned to. I'm not sure what happened today with that, but they did talk about that one apparently. That was all.
All right. Dean?
Oh, I have a question, Susan. On the referendum thing, on the repetitive referendum stuff.
Right.
In kind of my work with the referendum committee, I called Dan Rossmiller today.
Oh, okay.
And he told me the same thing you did, but he also said that if it happened to pass now, he doesn't think it's going to come up now, but if it happened to pass, it would not apply to us because it does not apply to those having a referendum this April. But if
Okay.
we had it
In the future, it would
later
apply.
on, it would.
I was wondering about that, the whole ex post facto law piece,
Yeah,
Constitution.
it was,
I don't know.
It could be amended on the floor, so we don't know that for sure.
Well, no, I think you could challenge that on a legal basis. So, yeah, and that's my understanding too. And I know that Speaker Voss has said he does want to end the session next week, so it's not like the Senate plans to go into March, so there's some inconclusiveness about that as well. But anyway.
Carrie?
I had,
That's worth-
but I didn't want to cut that
Oh,
short
that's
if we
good.
were still. The correspondence announcement things that I was hoping to reiterate something that we got in our email from Ms. Haas at Cottage Grove School, inviting people to come to the science fair for fourth graders, and just put a plug out there for people who were thinking about it. It might be a good thing for the Community Engagement Relations Committee to think about how to draw attention to this particular event. And maybe that's a reasonable thing for the Herald Independent to cover. That particular event is really fun, and I know some of you have been to it already many times. Just recently, the third graders had their history fair. I was kind of mentioning it to Jennifer before the meeting. I took a half day off of work to go to that, and it is worth every minute of it. And so just anyone who was thinking, I thought under correspondence announcements, I wanted to make a point of saying that it's just amazing to see the range of creative ideas of that particular thing. And anyone who was on the bubble, I was going to say, go.
Thank you.
I would reiterate, the science fair is some of them, it is absolutely incredible. And the setup, basically the resourcing and the structure that they're teaching them to research is very impressive. I mean, it prepares them in a good way for
yeah.
the science that we're going to be offering them.
Wednesday, February 24th, 1:45 to 2:20.
Yeah, and I think, these kinds of things go on in all the schools. Winnequa has these, and the high
Yes.
school has these things. Glacial
Wax
Grumman has
Museum.
I
a
love
social
it.
studies, like they do all kinds of special things like this too. And sometimes the teachers don't think to invite us, so
Right.
it's a matter of cruising through the newsletters, and you can kind of pull things out. It is really nice to go to those because that's what we're all here for, and I think it's nice to go to the ones in the different buildings as well. But and I also think it's helpful for you, Carrie, and other people, board members, to call to our attention when they're coming up, because sometimes you miss them. I'm not going to be in town for that one, or I would go.
They're more fun to attend than to
Yes, they're more fun.
help put together.
Yes.
Let me tell you, one of my favorite
All right.
exhibits, actually the science
Sorry,
study
I got this
and
started,
the
Peter.
process that they used was which ice cream melts the fastest, so you're joking.
Yeah.
But the process they used was incredibly
Well,
excellent
hypotheses.
scientific process.
Right.
All right, item I on the agenda, administrative reports. We have tonight the Director of Instruction report with Lisa Height. You're going to talk about summer school.
I am. So Reed Foster is here as well to add some insight and perspective. I believe last meeting we talked a little bit about the calendar, and part of that conversation led into summer school because we had the dates as part of what was noticed on the calendar conversation.
Thank you. Yes.
And so Superintendent Olson asked that we put together a summer school status report, and that's what we'll review for you this evening. And hopefully you had a chance to see this. I think it was loaded for you yesterday. But I thought I'd begin with just an overview of the philosophy that sort of drives the summer school programming for our district. The first bullet point there is that it's really an extension of the school year and not just an add-on that sometimes I think we used to think summer school was. And really stressing how it is an integral part of how we help all of our students achieve academically. Also that appropriate programming needs to be in place, and it looks different at each of the levels. So what elementary school student might enjoy may be very different than what a high school student needs. And so we have to make sure that we're meeting the needs at all the levels. Also, we've had conversation about comfortable and safe learning environments and making sure that students are feeling that they can give their best effort, and that our staff is also very comfortable during summer school and able to access the supplies and materials and things that they need to best meet student needs. Sometimes summer school materials come in a little bucket and gets transported to different locations. But if a staff member knows that something that he or she has used during the school year is readily accessible for a student during the summer, and it's just right down the hall or it's right in that corner of my room, that sometimes can make things easier. And then the last point, that really we want to stress that summer school is about opportunities for all students, and ways that we're trying to promote that is about expansion of the summer school sites and expansion of transportation. This was interesting for me as well, being new to the district, the sort of history of summer school sites. Prior to 2008, summer school was held in 3 sites. K-5 at Winnequa for the Monona students, K-5 in Taylor Prairie for Cottage Grove students, and then 6 through 12 at the high school. In 2008, Glacial Drumlin opened, and so that caused some shifting in how summer school was spaced, and K-5 stayed at Winnequa, but K-5 moved to Glacial Drumlin, and 6-12 at the high school. And then last summer, was the first attempt at an expansion of sites, and so it looked like this: K-5 at Winnequa, K-2 at Taylor Prairie, 3-5 at Cottage Grove, 6-8 at Glacial Drumlin, and 9-12 at the high school. As I mentioned, 2015, did I say 2005 before? 2015 was the first year that we expanded to all of the sites, and I think we can all agree from our lived experience that the first time you do anything, you pause at the end of that and you reflect and you learn, and then you continuously improve. So that was what we are doing here with this sort of reflection on that first year. Some of the feedback that we received was that rolling back students, specifically second graders at Cottage Grove, rolling them back to Taylor Prairie, and 5th graders at Glacial Drumlin and rolling them back to Cottage Grove, caused some disconnect and some uncomfortable moments for kids and sometimes parents. So we're committed this summer to keeping kids in their school sites and not doing the rollback. Also this year, we did have transportation, but it was really for just a select few students, mainly students who were in need of some remedial work during the summer. And again, that was good for a small group of students, but we do know that we heard comments about, how can we improve transportation for all? And so in working with Jared and other conversations, we think that we can put together a plan that will maybe not meet all needs, certainly do better than we did last summer. And then the last sort of opportunity for improvement for us is specifically geared towards middle school enrichment offerings. And in a moment, we'll share some feedback from Principal Renee Tennant, who was also going to be here tonight, but Peter, she may have what you have and has lost her voice, so she is not with us this evening, but we'll share what she put together. But she highlights very well that for a long time, the middle school summer school experience was focused mainly on remedial work and really mirroring a lot of the experience high school students had. And although that met a need, it didn't meet many needs, and we really want to make sure that our middle school offerings are there for all students. So you'll see in her document that enrichment classes more than doubled for Glacial Drumlin students, and we'd like to continue to build that up. So as I said, Renee and Reed joining us tonight, and Renee sort of through a document is joining us, and maybe I could ask Reed to sort of highlight some of the key points from that, and then he has some thoughts also, and then we'll try to answer your questions as best we can.
Yeah, I think one of the points that is important to look at is we really want our students to feel secure in their setting. And when we looked at this again, after reflecting after a year of the rollback, but I think the initial intent in getting back to the building level was to have them feel secure. But now instead of rolling back and keeping them in their buildings, it's a building that they know very well. And so because summer school is such a, it is an extension, but it's a small amount of time, if you take kids from other schools and put them all into one school, especially out in Cottage Grove, there's going to be a multitude of days there where you're just getting them used to where the classrooms are, where the bathrooms are, just the stuff that you need in order for them to feel secure and comfortable. So I think that's a big bonus of having it in the school. I also know that, like what Renee said here, you'll see a lot of teachers do summer school if it's in their own building. They'll stick around because again, they even feel like if they can use their classrooms and they can use that extra stuff like Lisa alluded to earlier, I think they're more apt to want to teach a course or be a part of summer school. And as Renee mentioned in her document, I actually was the Glacial Drumlin summer school coordinator for the first week and a half, or first 2 weeks. I was going to do it for the whole summer, but was fortunate enough to take a new position that I needed to hire 10 people for the school. So luckily, somebody was able to take over for me. But I think the neat thing about being at the middle school last year and the change to get to some of the enrichment classes is just the wide range of students you had at your building. And it was neat to go down to those classrooms and see these courses where whether they're working with robots or there are different fitness classes and so on and so forth. The engagement that you had in the multitude of learners was really exciting, and I know that they plan to continue to roll out more enrichment at the middle school this next year. I think the other thing that is helpful and makes it consistent that I just jotted a note down earlier too is I know when at Glacial Drumlin School we didn't have to start a new expectation behavior plan for summer school. We just rolled right into what our stuff was with the Wings program there. I talked with Cheryl Barrett, who was the summer school coordinator at Cottage Grove School last year. They were able to just stick with all their behavior programs. The one little, I should say, issue they did have was that rollback, because they got fifth graders back there. With this change of not doing the rollback, you would again have that year-long consistency piece for behavior, your systems that you run, and so on and so forth. So with last year at Glacial Drumlin, I had 103 students in their summer school program. I know that Lisa can provide some other information as total numbers, but the enrichment for Glacial Drumlin School prior to last year, they only had like 4 different classes, and it gets up to like 13 that they had last year, being able to be on site. And I know for a fact that while we were enrolling kids last year, because there wasn't transportation for kids from Monona to come back out to the middle school or to some of the further reach spots in Cottage Grove, that if they had some level of transportation, I think those numbers would have went up just last year. So that's another improvement with moving forward this year with the potential plan. So that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Susan?
I just think this is great. Again, our history is we did have regular coursework as well as remedial coursework. I know at least at that point it was at 1 o'clock. It's really nice to see this coming back. When you kind of do this, could you help us, like next time, if you're gonna expand the courses at the middle school, kind of so we could see, so like I'm not specifically seeing math, although I know there, and a specific science, although the robotics could be in that arena, and then specifically reading. But, you know, we've got the writing and we've got the Model UN, which teaches, you know, as a social studies element. So if we could just help see that element, and I'd encourage you to increase. So one of the things we did do in the past is we actually offered, you know, the advanced math courses at the middle school. You can go by 1 year or 2 years. We actually offered that to the 1 year advanced so they could go into the 2 year if they wanted to. And then the kids that might want to move into advanced class could do that through a summer school program. So that might be something that you would look at. And then, again, I strongly encourage you to help us offer coursework at the high school, understanding that that's going to be longer and more tedious and more difficult to do. But if we could offer that financial literacy in the summer, we might be able to open up opportunities for kids to take other course offerings during the year. I mean, I'm just saying even one of the required courses would be just super. Give them an opportunity to take it. Just thoughts.
Dean?
Jared, how is summer school financed? And is it a loser or a money maker?
Well, I can tell you that for the last number of years, we have not spent over what we've budgeted for summer school. In addition to that, when we look at the revenue limits, we bring in about $40,000 to $45,000 more than we spend on summer school. So it's technically a money maker when you look at that. But those are for summer school programming and
Those are
DPA.
state aid?
Through the revenue, so we're able to collect FTEs, which is a combination of property taxes and state aid. So definitely think that the way that we're moving, being able to continue having those kids in those same buildings and enhancing, I mean, like I said, we haven't spent over what we've budgeted. We've actually been below, and when we came over to the new sites, there obviously were some increased costs. We provided transportation, there was a few more, but we still were under what we budgeted. One of the things to understand about how summer school's budgeted is that when we do the enrollments, we're not just hiring all teachers and then their classes are full. All of our classes are full, which then equates into a certain number of minutes, which equates into revenue. So we do have some flexibility, and I know there's a philosophy out there that, you know, well, it gives us an opportunity for some extra money to help someplace else, but really this, you know, is allowing us to extend our school year until the district's ready to have that conversation about changing our school calendar. This is a great opportunity to continue without dipping into our budgets to go farther behind.
So what I hear you saying is summer school is financed pretty closely like the regular school year with state aids for FTE.
Yes.
And transportation costs are.
So our transport, yes.
I mean, it's an extension of the school year.
Correct.
Financially, for all intents and purposes.
Right. So we're not losing
It is
any
not
money
an
on summer
undue
school.
burden on the local.
Correct.
On the local property tax and that sort of thing.
Jared, how many FTEs what does a summer school student count as?
Well, I can't remember exactly how many minutes they have to be in class, but for example, we got 63 FTEs, which converts on the revenue limit to 40%. So we got to count 25 of those towards our base revenue, which is $10,000. So, you know, you bring in about $255,000, and we're only spending about $223 right now.
I think it's
Effect-
220 minutes.
220 minutes.
Effectively, what the finance is just increases our student count,
Counts.
Right.
and that raises our revenue limit by the appropriate
Yes.
amount. And it raises
It's
it by
not
25.
pulling, right.
It's not one-to-one.
Yep, it's not pulling money out of our regular classrooms during the
Right.
school year to fund
That's
summer
the
school.
point
Correct.
I think I knew the answer
Yep.
before I asked it, but I wanted to.
Clarify that, it's not pulling money out.
We understand that it's not a frill imposed completely on local property taxation.
Right.
Carrie?
Thank you. This is awesome, and I was totally in the weeds on this because I had a second grader who was rolled back last year, and so I appreciate, and I'm pleased, and I think a lot of people will appreciate the non-rollback. That's awesome. And then I had the question about transportation, whether our thinking is that it would be handled on a fee basis for people. I mean, have you gotten that far ahead yet for like the I can't think, the buy a seat kind of concept? Is that what would apply in the summer similarly to the school year, or because summer is different, any student who needed bus transportation, that would be like, I don't know how far you've gotten thinking about that.
Talk a little bit to that, and then I think Jared can probably fill in the gaps, but I think there used to always just be a shuttle that went from the high school to GDS,
Yes.
and from GDS to the high school, and if families could get their students to one or either of those locations, they could take that shuttle. What we are hoping to do is set up sort of like common stops that you know, are more expansive than just those two, but still it's not the, I guess I'm going to say, door-to-door service that you might see during a regular school year.
Okay.
So that should help a bit maybe with families being able to maneuver kids to and from different schools. So thinking about, you know, maybe some stops near elementary sites, et cetera, through the communities. I think that will help alleviate some transportation concerns.
Awesome.
But still, so one of the questions we'll ask during registration is, you know, is transportation something that you'd be interested in? Just so we can sort of gauge two things. One, how many people are interested, and two, like, what locations are they at? And then we'll see what we can put together from there.
Awesome. Thank you for looking at that. That's a real issue for people trying to squirrel their kids to these
I mean,
different
not
places.
only between the different sites, but you know, in the past, we only provided it for students with remedial, and we're just totally putting an additional label on
Right.
students that are coming. Everybody knows that.
Oh, right.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
plus we understand families, you know, and having at different sites and stuff like that. So like Lisa had stated, is in the registration we'll ask, do you need transportation? We obviously need people to sign up for that, so we know how we're going to sort of do the routing, and so there'll be common stops throughout. So we won't be doing the door-to-door pickup. So and they'll be a little bit more spread out than the typical school year. So if you live like within 2 or 3 blocks of Taylor Prairie, we're probably going to tell you to go to Taylor Prairie to get on the bus.
Right.
But at least we're providing transportation. We're not making kids walk across town in Cottage Grove. We haven't had the conversation with the village of Cottage Grove yet on the crossing guards, but they did it last year, so I don't foresee them not doing it. They were very receptive when we went to their meeting to allow at least, not the full-fledged crossing guards, but at least a few by Cottage Grove School.
Awesome, thank you. And I had another question too, can I go on? My understanding is that College for Kids is discontinued, which is a UW-Madison program that captured some of the middle schoolers. And so I'm sort of have that in the back of my mind as I'm going to ask this next question, which is, to what extent is there a market analysis about gaps and like what kind of programming we can offer specifically because no one else is doing it already? There isn't a summer camp option that's doing the same rocket class or, you know, those kinds of things. Does that factor in, or is it really more we need to offer what we can based on the individual teachers that want to teach summer school? I don't know, I just am curious, is it market driven, is it teacher interest driven,
Yeah.
some of both? How do we, because
So-
I'm just wanting
Yeah.
to say I am so happy that we're offering this expanded curriculum, and then it's sort of like, so how do we choose what to do?
So it's very teacher-driven currently because without teachers who are willing to teach the class, we're at a loss. But I will say that there are some partnerships that happen, particularly with the middle school students, and some of the outreach that Renee has done with different programs to bring specifically like some science curriculum and things. She's looking at more of a cultural arts type of program partnership. So some things like that happen where we're using some outside resources to teach the classes for students because we see that that could be a good experience for the kids that we can't otherwise offer, but also who is internally able to staff classes and what would they like to run. So for instance, like the new Harry Potter book club class that ran last year, that was internal. We had someone who just really loves that content and wanted to run a class like that with kids. So that really drives a lot of it.
Thanks, yeah.
Susan?
Well, and I know there are sometimes issues with, say, destination imagination or something like that, where some of our teachers would do that and like doing it, but they actually get paid quite a bit more if they do it through community rec programs, so that's what they do instead, because they are needing to make money in the summer
Right.
frequently, so that makes sense. So we run into a little bit of that as well, but yeah, a lot of it is who you can find to teach, whatever. And I think with high school kids, you know, because we haven't done that in such a long time, it would be maybe worth even doing some surveys to see. Like, I don't really know whether kids would sign up for financial literacy in the summer. I thought it would be good because it's another mandatory thing that we've added on, and it clogs for some kids, it's a schedule issue. But I don't, you know, you'd have to look at, obviously, if you're gonna give credit for it, it's gotta have a certain number of hours, certain amount of material, and whether that fits in or not, but it, you know, I think it's worth considering and looking at to see.
I've had some early conversations with Paul at the high school, and so it would just need to have more conversation.
Right.
I mean, in part, you're right, 90 hours is what's required for initial credit. Our summer school does not run 90 hours,
Right.
so for high school students, that would need to be extended. But also, our students currently are allowed to take quite a few credits through their 4 years, a significant number more than they need to graduate.
Right.
And so then to offer credit during the summer, you know, it really would depend on that pool of kids, when they already know that in the course of 4 years, that they, you know, perhaps can take, you know, 32 credits, and they definitely don't need that many to graduate, so.
Susan?
You were talking about, and again, I just kind of was trying to get some thoughts, because people will ask us, how to transport, particularly City of Monona students to Glacial Drumlin. So would you consider just to stop at 1 o'clock and pick up at 1 o'clock and take them? Because most of those students could pretty easily transport themselves. I'm
Yeah,
just,
we have not determined the common stops yet.
okay. And then, in the past, Jared, you know, summer school made money. I mean, we actually made profits off of that.
Yep.
So that is a potential if we get the programming.
Right, I mean, currently, right
Well,
now,
that's not-
we're, if you wanted to use the
Doing
word
that.
profit,
Yeah.
about 40,000 versus what we're spending versus
Okay.
what we're collecting through revenue limits.
And then the other thing I would mention is to continue to look for grants as we do this. So when I look at Grow Your Own Lunch, Healthy Classrooms, if you had submitted that, probably would have given you a $1,000 grant for that. So, again, as you look at some of this programming, it's gonna fit both the State Medical Society and the Medical Student Healthy Classrooms offers for anything that relates to students in a healthy classroom environment or teaching healthy classrooms. And then that symposium is in February, it's usually pretty impressive.
I have a question, which is, if a student is, say, after second grade, is going to attend summer school, they would do so at Taylor Prairie, correct? Not at Cottage Grove? Or
The
is it-
school that they are currently in right now
Mm-hmm.
would be the school that they would attend summer school in,
Okay.
so not based on next
There
year's rate.
isn't, would there be some advantage to doing it where they attend the school they will be attending in the next year? Give them an
talked about
opportunity
that.
to acclimatize to
Yeah, we
working
talked
in
about
that
that a little
environment?
bit with the principals, particularly with the 5th grade students at Winnequa, and perhaps having some early exposure as they're months away from being 6th graders at Glacial Drumlin.
Mhm.
But the thought was really to have them in their home schools
Mhm.
for the summer. I think that was sort of the overwhelming consensus, that outweighed the transition piece.
Yeah, I'm just thinking,
Because they do, I think, some programming for the transition.
Because I think one of the things, Peter, with the I think it's a good thought, because it's like a jump start, kind of
Mhm,
similar,
mhm.
but you're not guaranteed all students.
Right.
So you start
I know.
you start thinking about gaps and start thinking about, you know, do you get this 100 ahead, and they get a little bit more acclimated, but what about the, you know, or 50, whatever, then you're always playing this game with who's had it and who hasn't had it, if
Mhm.
that's the way you run it. So with the idea that you're looking at as enrichment and extension,
Mhm.
you don't have to spend any time when they stay in the school that they're at, like I previously mentioned, because they already know the system. So I think that was one of the discussions that principals had when we were talking about if you bump up one, you know, to their next building versus keeping them at their school.
Mhm. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks again. More questions. The timing for this. So 4 weeks, June into July. Last year, I recall, but I don't remember the specifics of an August program. And is there, on our slides for tonight, we didn't have the dates worked out, so I'm just getting my head around what your thoughts are. This I was thinking about as the early summer, but your point that made me think of was it is different if it's an extension of the year, June, July, but then there's, I'd like to think, some break, and then coming back again in August. That's to Peter's point about that would be the jump start time, would be in your new school if you were. So is there a plan to do something in August again this year?
So last summer, the August literacy sessions were started, again, initial year of implementation. I think we invited 70 students to participate across the elementary schools, and I believe nearly half participated. And I think we can grow that as well. But that was a very specific focus on literacy and an attempt to, you know, again, like sort of find ways around the summer slide that sometimes happens for students and really get our students thinking and practicing those literacy skills just weeks before school starts. But I'll let Reed talk a little bit about how the transition and jumpstart programs happen for students.
Well, I know in regards to, they have a great program for the high school as a jumpstart for the incoming freshmen. I've never participated, or I just know of it. I know a lot of kids take it. But I know last year with that August session, the intention was very the remedial side of literacy, and so it was to sort of help with the, like Lisa mentioned, that slide, just more time. So I don't know that we've discussed whether or not what the right location is for that. I would say I know in the case of who taught it at Cottage Grove last year, because I was there, it is your reading specialist. So those would be the teachers that those students would work with during the course of the year. So there's a good, nice continuity and good connection with those teachers. So I see a benefit of that.
And we're planning to continue doing that in August this year, because I thought that was an awesome idea. I know you heard your pickup rate was a little bit less than what you had thought, and it was a small cohort, but still, I just thought it was awesome. Yeah, and so I was hoping you were thinking of doing that again, and I wasn't sure if it was the cost benefit analysis. Like, yes, it was worth doing it.
Definitely.
And it's actually surprising to me, but that summer slide thing hits across the whole spectrum of students. It's not, you know, so I know that August was targeted particular for students who really needed it, but I don't know if we have the capacity, if there would be other families or other students who would also be interested in coming back for some. The reason I'm thinking about this is because that Harry Potter class did sound really fun. I mean, there are some literacy things that can be done that aren't, I want to say this in a nice way, that are fun. And so I don't know if we have the capacity to do that, but the Battle of the Books kind of thing, even in the summer with, you know, a contest and reading logs and things, can appeal to a lot of different students. I just don't know if we have the capacity, or if it's really thinking about doing that August thing again just as a remedial thing.
Well, I should add too, because I think it's relevant to this conversation, that last year we had librarians come and spend some time so that the school libraries could be open at least some of the week, so maybe not every day, but at least a few days a week, and students could come in, and I think I'm saying it wasn't even just the students in summer school, but students could come in and access the library and get books. And
I knew that was underutilized from the capacity of it, especially without having a school library in Cottage Grove. I mean, that is such an awesome thing to offer, but I'm not sure that the public knew about it, or that it was widely even known. So that would be a question about how do we make that available to more middle school kids, just even if they're not in summer school. We have the bookmobile, but that's not really cutting it for everybody, and so if there's a way to broaden it. And I guess I would just be interested to hear, as you get into the August thing, like who that invitation might be extended to, if we really just have the capacity to do the intensive help.
Sure.
All right, very good. Oh,
How are we doing numbers wise last year compared to previous years?
So last year at each of the elementary sites, there were about 250 students and slightly over 100 at GDS and about 250 at the high school, but also at the high school included in that number were nearly 100 students in the sort of the strength and conditioning or speed and agility class. So that's how the numbers were, and then looking in past years, it actually is a fairly consistent number, so we're not necessarily seeing large growth. I mean, I think give or take 20 to 30 students, if I'm thinking of that right, that's the fluctuation we're seeing. It's been, at least for the last maybe 7 or so years, fairly consistent.
It seemed less crowded to me last year
Mm.
in the classes, so I don't know if people aren't taking 4 classes or if it's just what it was. I mean,
Yeah,
just
I'm not sure. I mean,
not
they have a
everybody in one
choice
school.
to-
So you
yeah.
think that opening all the schools has been a good thing?
Yeah,
That's the feedback that I've heard, you know, yeah, that it was positive.
Uh-huh. And it wasn't overly expensive for us.
It was slightly more, but we're still under what we're spending less than what we take in.
Right. Well, yeah, I got that. And now we got to add a bus route, right?
Well, we had some busing last year, but we're going to look to see how we can bus a wider swath of kids. So the busing we had last year, you'd have very few kids on a bus, still paying for the bus is still driving through the neighborhood, so we're hoping we can find ways to be a bit more efficient and customer-friendly with busing.
Okay.
Susan?
I just say, I really appreciated your explanation of the benefits of keeping the kids in their same schools, because they all made a lot of sense to me. And I think for teachers, we don't pay them much, if any, prep time for summer school. I mean,
Not much.
it's pretty much nothing. And for them to have to truck their stuff around, I think that's a huge benefit, and you may have more teachers who are willing to do it if they can do it in their own classroom. So I really appreciate that, because I hadn't thought about all those points.
Did we?
Thank you.
Did we have more teachers? Well, you.
Well, there are more classes.
well, I
I've
think
heard.
number
I mean,
one.
we may have, but now we have a year in. We know if we did it or we didn't.
We had more in-house staff continue on summer school.
Okay.
I don't know exactly, but I do know that we hired very little out.
Well, just with the added extra classes at the middle school, that most of those classes were taught by middle school teachers, that those classes didn't exist the year before, so
Mhm.
there's already an increase
Right.
based on just that.
All right, Lisa and Reed, thank you.
Thank you.
If you would, Lisa, if there's no objection, I'd like to move right now, though, to the new business item 1, which is assessment and possible approval of the summer school coordinator or in the added and pay schedule, since we're on the summer school topic. If there's no objection to that.
That makes sense.
Do you want to talk about that, or are you
I can.
prepared to talk about that? Yeah.
So, again, some history with that. In years prior to last year, there was an elementary coordinator, a secondary coordinator, and then site supervisors at each of the sites. And so last year, there was a slight change. The site coordinators were, I'm going to say, replaced by Deb Lyons, who was serving as the coordinator, I guess, of the program, and then there were site supervisors. So this year, going forward, we know we don't have Deb Lyons in that role anymore, and so the question was, do we go back to that previous model of an elementary coordinator, a secondary coordinator with site supervisors, or do we look at keeping site supervisors, adding some responsibility with some additional compensation to those roles, allowing site supervisors to really sort of own their school more and that summer programming, to be involved before the first day of summer school, which had been past practice. They sort of showed up on the first day of summer school and they supervised what happened in the building, but they weren't very involved leading up to that. And so I met with many of the site supervisors from last year and talked with previous coordinator as well about thoughts and feelings with this. And again, the overwhelming response was, we think that it would be a good idea to have I think we morphed the name a little bit to site coordinator, increase the compensation a bit to account for some of that involvement early. And so with the help of some district office personnel, myself, Maureen Lehman, and Amy Kirsten, our data and assessment specialist, to help with scheduling. So with some help there, and then working with the site coordinators, we think that will be a smooth and sort of take out the middleman approach to running summer school. So the proposal is to sort of eliminate those site, or the elementary and secondary coordinator roles, and to add in site coordinators.
There's attached to in board docs is the additive schedule, and the only thing that's changed, everything else is the same on there. The only thing that's changed is the summer school positions. Susan?
I would move approval of the revised 2015-16 summer school site coordinator additive pay schedule as proposed.
Second that.
Moved and seconded.
Just a question, is the differential difference because the elementary school sites have more enrollment? Okay, that was my guess, not just because little kids are squirrelier and harder to manage. Well, that was my second guess. And so if that's in proportion to what you think the job is, okay.
I don't know what you say about our elementary schools.
Yeah.
15.
I can add that the personnel committee went through this entire thing and has recommended its passage.
Great.
That's helpful.
Great.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. A motion to approve the revised 2015-16 additive schedule. It is. This counts as 2015-16 schedule.
Right.
Right. Not next year's schedule. Right. Okay. All in favor?
Okay, one more question.
Sure.
Do we say how many in the position description? We don't say how many weeks it is. Does that matter for the additive purposes?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's just
That's
the.
calculated in. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's built
Okay.
in.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work on
Yeah,
that.
thanks.
And we'll move back to item J, board reports, starting with the policy committee report.
All right.
Susan?
The policy committee has met 3 times since the last board meeting on January 27th, February 2nd, and February 9th. To review and discuss, we're still working on our current policy 840, public gifts to schools, and we're thinking that probably will come to you in March, because we've said a few other additional thoughts came up, and we'll explain that when we bring it in. Another one that you might want to be thinking about is 345.11 class rank. We have a proposal from Dr. Brost to not to report out class rank, except in cases where it's, except for cases of like the Wisconsin Academic Scholarship, I forget what that's called, which more and more schools are doing. And if you look at the research nationally, some 50% of schools are doing it, and colleges are kind of getting used to it, that if they have it on their application, what's your class rank, students simply put, my school doesn't report this. But if you wanted to read about it, just so you're thinking about it before it comes to you, you could look at our board docs meeting from February 9, because the proposal is there, and it is February 2nd and 9, actually. The proposal is there for both of those. So you could read he has a very well laid out what the rationale is. I know the high school staff has been talking about this for a couple of years. So if you want to get just a heads up that will be coming to you at some time, probably in March also, I'm not sure. And then the other thing we've been working on are the 5,000s, which are the policies related to students, and we're about maybe a third of the way through those. So we're making progress. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 15th at 9:30 here at the district office.
Thank you. Dean, the next is the referendum committee report. Dean?
I don't have anything to hand out tonight.
What?
Wow.
And,
Good.
Oh, you're disappointed?
No.
So we had we really basically had a work session on dealing with the informational documents for the referendum materials, and we'll be meeting tomorrow night to see the final product of that and that sort of thing. I think that I just like to add kind of where we are a little bit on this. This is not really a product of the committee, but that date, April 5th, is 10 weeks away. And those 10 weeks will go fast.
Mm-hmm.
Susan reported earlier on the referendum date. I thought that I made that inquiry, Susan, because I thought that on our documents that if in fact we lost this referendum, if that were the case, then we may want to consider putting that on the documentation. So I didn't know you were reporting. Most of our work and most of the meeting tomorrow night, but not all, will be dealing with what is currently in print form, but will be online and also be out there are the fact sheets, the postcards, and we'll be getting to websites and a fact sheet mailer and some of those kind of materials for public information. Hopefully we'll be wrapping those up last night so that they can be printed in time, that they can begin to get out to the targeted groups on our communication plan. I would add that, and I think this is echoed by some people around the table that I've told me too, there's some confusion about an operational versus a building referendum, and what is the difference. And I think this largely grows from the published reports on the board's efforts to deal with the grade configuration, and in those reports the persistent reference to build a school in each of the options. And I don't know about you, but I think 2 or 3 people that talked to me about this is that that's one of the first things that came to their mind, and it wasn't the case. But we will have some discussion about the newspapers, print media, developing an FAQ, which is an ongoing document that has to keep up with questions, problems, issues, and changes, and that sort of thing. And it's probably my experience with the FAQs, it needs one person to kind of maintain it so you have the same language that's being used. We also have to, we're going to expand and talk about tomorrow night, so if you have any ideas, send them to me or come. We have to deal with, we're finishing up the teacher information sections. I think we may want to decide whether we need another round of those someplace along the line or not, but they'll be finished up tomorrow, I believe. We'll talk about other outlets such as the local radio station here, and I have had conversations with each of the principals about persons in getting school-based groups to help getting the information out, and I also talked to Paul. Paul was one of the ones I mentioned to him about the booster groups, and he has arranged now for us to meet with some, whoever wants to come on the board, to meet with the teacher leaders and that sort of thing of that, to make the next steps, and that date is being set up. On our plan, we'll have a whole lot of events and so forth, like the musical events and so forth, but parent and PTO sessions, and then there's a community and public information plan that hopefully we can put together, and we can, I believe the MGEA as an organization has endorsed the referendum, and we also have to get out and meet some of the public officials in local governments and that sort of thing. And there's a whole plan that I think I'm going to raise these issues tomorrow night, but we will be putting, our first task tomorrow night will be to put the final touches on a fact sheet. That fact sheet also converted to a mailer and a postcard portion of that. I think it's down to final editing. I hope we can put all those, because we need to get them printed and published. We need to get them out, hopefully by February 11th, to get the strings and those kinds of events and so forth. So the committee will be working on that, and it will be done. So that's just a but I do have one recommendation, Mr. President. I think it would be very important that that this Board of Education, and perhaps being joined by administrator groups, all have, even if it's just the board, that we have a common workshop on the referendum, all the facts and known information, so that we're all on the same page and we all have the same basic information. I think those of us who've been around the block with it or have been closer to it have a better understanding of potential issues and questions and answers and what this referendum is. And I think it would be good that we all sit down and so that we all know some of the many questions and also can share in some of the common answers. I don't know what the rest of you think on that. I've talked with a couple of you. You know, we've shared that idea. So I'll leave it at that. And tomorrow night, the committee. That's it.
First off, does anybody have any input about a response to Dean's suggestion for a board workshop related to the referendum? Susan?
Yeah, I actually had that on the list, and I appreciate you adding that, because I wasn't sure you were going to at the end. I think it's really kind of imperative, first of all, if nothing else, to have someone walk each of us through the fact sheet, so we know what's on the fact sheet, you know, where the information is, and how it's being presented, so that we're all consistent in how we use the fact sheet. Then the other thing that would be helpful is to know what's the supplemental material that's attached to the fact sheet. So for this particular bullet point, if you need something, this is right there. If you need this, this is right there. Then you can help the committee and administration identify, you know, I could really use an additional piece of information here, and it would be helpful if we had this. So just doing that process with the board, I think, will be very helpful in not only preparing us individually, but in preparing administration and the committee in helping to get the information out to other arenas. And it can be a very simple approach, but I think it's, again, reviewing the resource and using a consistent approach.
It doesn't have
I strongly support that.
It doesn't have to be a whole evening or no.
An hour?
I think we would have an hour and 15 minutes. We could get through most of this stuff.
And then I would put a schedule of the events, because how many events did Joyce have on that list?
A lot of them, but you may have ideas too. So
how to get the information out, so we'd appreciate that input from the board, and then if in fact we're going to identify specific events, whether or not that's when you might be attending and could help provide information.
Susan?
I think that's a good idea also, because I think it's important for everybody to be on the same page. And I also think it's very important for all of us to recognize that it's perfectly fine and acceptable to say, I don't know, I'll get that information for you, or I don't know, and refer people to Jared or Dan or somebody like that, rather than guess when you don't know. Because there's a lot of complicated stuff. I mean, I've been given a lot of complicated questions, and the only reason I can answer them is because I've been here a long time and I've done a lot of this finance stuff and thought about it a lot. And if you haven't, I think it's harder. And rather than guess at stuff, it's fine to say I don't know. And sometimes I don't know. And I email Jared. Having said that, however, I probably won't be here for it, so it's easy for me to say you should have one.
And
So
the rest
I'm
of
gonna
you
be
are
out of town
required
for a
to
while.
attend.
But I think it's a good idea.
Anyone else? Any objections?
There's a 0% chance it'll only last an hour.
What's that?
There's a 0% chance it only lasts an hour. I'm all for it. I'm just one.
Okay, you can
That's
leave
like
after an
that
hour. Would it be your idea to invite, would this be just purely the board? Or would we like to invite other community leaders, perhaps?
I think we ought to keep it
If-
to the board, and my only, I'm thinking about numbers. I think we ought to keep it to the board, and I think if our principals want to join us as central office staff, that would be fine. It would help it maybe enrich the responses and that sort of thing, and they're not all Jared questions. Yeah, Jared is probably, in terms of the dollar signs, is the key resource, but I think having Lisa there at least,
Right.
and
That's a good point.
because if she can't answer it, then she could quickly, dredge up the answer or something like that. And, on questions of, class size and, stuff like that. So I'd like to keep it to the 7 of us, or maybe add as many as 3 or 4 more, whatever we might have.
I would add, and again, I'm putting this out to the board, I would add administration to that, because if you look at the core team that's gonna be providing the information to the community,
Sure.
you wanna be educating that core team, so
Sure.
I would, again, include principals in the core admin team, piece, in a room. It's just really helpful,
I
for
would
every-
endorse that.
and for everybody to have the same position. And that's basically to educate us on the fact sheet and the resource information, because it's gonna be very difficult to ask you to disseminate information if you don't know what it is, or you haven't bought into the information as it's
But
provided.
if the board feels like that's it,
Then we're gonna
we-
use a group underneath that.
we'll discuss it further tomorrow night at the committee and get that rolling.
If we didn't have
Okay.
closed session, we could do it before a board meeting, but
Okay.
we'll just have to see.
Yeah, if we're gonna wait that
Well,
long.
yeah, it'd
Can't
be
wait
2
that
weeks
long.
before our next board meeting, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dean.
Sure.
Moving on to L, new business, discussion and possible approval of revised administrator job descriptions. Nicole? It's going to help us out with this. There's a number of job descriptions for administrators attached to the board docs.
All right, so the job descriptions that we previously had were pretty old. So we did an update to reflect their current responsibilities and try to get away from the minutia and like the little tasks to do with more broad job goals. So that is what is reflected here. Also worked with the individuals who will hold these positions so that they were reviewing these job descriptions, saying yes or no, yes I do these things, no I don't, here are some suggestions of things to add or edit, so that's what's here.
Does anybody have any questions or comments about the job descriptions? Does everybody like them as written? Susan?
I'll just say, I like them as written, and I really appreciate you doing this, because I know every time we would hire for these positions and we look at our job descriptions, we think, oh
Mhm.
man, these really need to be rewritten. So I appreciate that you've done this, I think they're, I like them, I think they're, I have a comment.
Susan?
Well, and I really appreciate that you went back to the staff that's doing the job, because sometimes we don't do that. And all of a sudden, you realize that they are in fact doing this, and you want to be able to include that and use that in the evaluative process. And because they're doing it, they want you to use it too. So I think that's an incredibly helpful piece as well. I appreciate you doing that.
Dean?
When you're all done with this, would you give us all a copy of it when they're all approved and done?
Of these?
It's,
Yeah.
Actually,
It's already in
they're,
board
if they're in board docs,
it's right here.
I have, you can have my printed
You
ones.
just told me to get it myself, right?
No, you can have my printed ones, because I printed
Okay.
them. So you want to pass these over to Dean? Because I like reading them on paper too, so I printed them before.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think it would be nice to have them available to, there may be a new board member someday who hasn't lived their life here.
Where are you going to post these?
Well, I was thinking
Yeah.
maybe we could find a spot on our website.
Because they do need to be
Yeah,
posted.
exactly. Right, I think in our policy, it might refer to a job description manual. I'll look at what we decided in policy.
Well, they used to be posted.
Yep. And then we
Well, it used to be in policy, and we pulled them out of policy,
Put 'em on policy, but it would be
but
nice
we've
to
always,
post it.
yeah, we've always talked about a policy manual or something that could be
Right.
under the HR.
Right, and it would be nice to maybe put them online so people can easily
I think
access
it
them,
would, yeah.
especially once we get them updated, so.
Yeah.
Again,
Right.
you find people that are looking in our district to see what we do and how we do it, and if you have job descriptions for some of the major administrative jobs, that's a factor for somebody that might be reading about that.
To what extent are they kind of a guidance document? To what extent are they a legal document?
Well, I think there are a lot guidance. We do use these when we post jobs. We recently did post for an elementary principal and director of student services. So these postings really guided what we put out there in terms of our responsibilities and our qualifications. In terms of being legal, when you say that something is a required qualification, then you need to make sure whoever you are hiring has that requirement. Job descriptions also come into play legally in terms of the Americans with Disabilities Act, in terms of their essential functions and things that they need to be able to do their job. So let's say somebody gets injured and then or has an illness, we need to use this job description and have their physician work with us to say, yes, they can do these things, no, they can't. Then we make an evaluation of whether we can accommodate them or whether we are unable to accommodate them.
Now, when someone is evaluated on one of these, are they evaluated on each of these factors?
Well,
Is
right
that
now
the
for our
evaluation form?
administrators, we have, like, our principals and our assistant principals are under educator effectiveness. There's a evaluation that's put out by the state, and then our district office personnel have their own. We just are going to My Learning Plan things, so it's not necessarily we just use this job description. It's a broader evaluation.
So you
process.
hire them by this, but you don't evaluate them after
Well,
they get on the job by the same.
I think a lot of these things do align with what we're measuring.
Okay. 'Cause I haven't always seen much correlation between all these.
Susan?
I've got to go back and research that, because I know we did research that. Either policy or law required that we do that.
The job
And some of the,
descriptions?
yeah, and some of the contracts require that.
Yes,
So
you're
I think it's,
Yep, so in
we do that.
administrative rule, we need to have the board approve administrative job descriptions or certified job descriptions. And then per administrative contracts, it says that individuals will receive a copy of the job descriptions.
Okay.
Policy? We can talk about it later, but Dean, I think there's language that tells us we will use those.
Again.
Carrie?
Well, it does seem to me, to Dean's point, that you would use the job description to align that to the educator effectiveness stuff. I mean, it may not be 100%, and the educator effectiveness might also review other additional things, but I mean, the way you kind of sum that up is, oh, so these are all disparate things. That wasn't really my takeaway from this. I sort of feel like they feed together
Well, there's job
in a logical
descriptions,
way
there's
for
teacher
the
effectiveness,
person.
and it's what people do or all.
Do we have any
Well-
additional concerns about the content of
Do you have
the-
any reason to think they're not aligned, that these job descriptions aren't aligned with how we're evaluating people? Because I didn't hear you saying that.
I
Susan?
think that the point that I've always heard is that the evaluations need to reflect the job descriptions. They don't have to be line for line,
Right.
evaluate these
Mhm.
specific points. And I think you'd find that they do. That was what I was
Exactly.
gonna say, but I don't know if Reed had his hand up, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I would say that the educator effectiveness piece for administrators would align very well with this job description.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And if I could just add that the central office evaluations, the model using the CISA 5, strong model, that too has those same components.
Right.
It's just, instead of being in Teachscape for educator effectiveness and principles, it's in the My Learning Plan.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to raise
All right.
that issue.
No, I was like, wait a second.
Hold on a second.
That's not right.
Okay, if I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the administrative job descriptions as presented.
So moved.
Dean and Carrie? Somebody second, fine. Any further
Big one
discussion?
there.
No, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Nicole. Item 3 under new business, discussion and potential sale of district properties. Jared.
All right. Pull this up on the screen. So one of the things that we need to begin the conversation on is when we did our long-range facility plan, we talked about some properties that the district have that don't necessarily house schools, and what we should do with those properties. And so what I did is I took the PowerPoint that I did with the long-range facility, so it does have our schools. I think it's just a nice reference for you guys to have, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details on the schools. What we're going to want to do is start a conversation, so it gives me sort of some direction of how we want to move forward. So there was a recent change with state law through the state budget that we don't necessarily have to go to the annual meeting to get approval to sell property anymore. Second of all, there's a couple of ways of going about selling property. We can issue an RFP for a realtor. The realtor can do the work, can bring forward quote or offers. We go into closed session, we can discuss that and negotiate back and forth. Or we can work with our legal counsel. We can issue a notice that we're accepting sealed bids. The district receives those, puts it through the official notice. We open those up in closed session. We have the right to reject those. There's a little bit of some uniqueness with some of our property that's something that we'll want to talk about tonight, and sort of that where it might work better to work with one angle versus the other angle. So these are just pretty much aligned by, we're starting in Monona, our high school, where it's at when it was built. Just this is more for your reference, houses grades through 9. So I got some maps of where it's located at. We all know where our high school is.
Are you proposing the sale?
No sale of our high school, no sale of Winnequa, but it just tells you when it was built, how many square feet, and what grades are there. Nichols School District Office, and so what this does, and I'm not for sure if my battery's going to work, but the property for this building actually sort of follows this open field here up to Monona Drive and then back down, and then jets back in by the residents at the end of our driveway, and then follows so there's soccer fields that are back here that the community uses, and then this is where the community garden is for MG21. So no sales proposed with this specific property. However, there's an adjoining property that you can't see that's a separate lot that I will talk about a little bit later here. Maywood School, which we have closed, but we are in a partnership with Madison School District. They are leasing it, and this is where we house our Nuestro Mundo, where our partnership is for the dual immersion program. So these are this is the start of our other properties that we have. These are located up by our high school. They're actually located in the city of Madison. At this point, we're not making a recommendation to sell these properties. What we are making a recommendation is that we're going to move forward to work with the Planning Commission of the city of Madison. One of the areas that what we're trying to do is potentially make a change to our tennis courts. Right now, you see how they run. We would like to change that configuration to be more north and south, and which requires us to utilize some properties. The goal would be eventually is to be able to put this house, the 4217 Jerome Streets and the 4221 Jerome Street back at the market. But in order for us to do that, we are possibly going to need some property a little bit from those lots. They're fairly large lots. But we still need to work with the neighborhood association and the planning commission. But when we do that, we feel that we could utilize that money to help us improve our tennis courts. So one of the conversations that we'll continue to have is that administration is not making any recommendations to sell property to fill our budget gap. Property, once it's sold, is gone, but we also know that we have facility needs. So this is a perfect opportunity to use those facility needs of our tennis courts and those houses around that to be able to sort of help fund it. So this process, we wouldn't be necessarily going out for an RFP to a realtor quite yet. We need to work with the city of Madison. We have to also finalize what our plans are for the tennis courts, because we can't really determine a plan with the city of Madison until we determine what we're going to really do with our courts. So these properties are probably a little bit more down the road, but it's something that's on our radar, and obviously with the referendum being able to answer those questions, because that's going to be questions that potentially come up.
Gary?
Yes.
My understanding, and from this on the tennis court and those properties, is that whatever you might work out on the realignment of the property line and the sale of the house, I understand that typically the city of Madison planners will, that if they approve what we want, that we would have a time specific in which to execute that plan. Is that usually the case?
Right. So we have had, for a number of years, and Susan's been part of that, is conversations with more of the neighborhood association. But I have actually had the opportunity to meet with the City of Madison's Planning Commission, and what they've said is, once you get approval, you have a number of years to execute what you want to do. Well, there's a significant cost to our tennis courts. So instead of moving down that road and doing that when we don't have any money right now, that's part of the reason that whole property is on hold. But it's still something that we need to keep forefront and that we talk about, especially as we continue this long-range facility planning. We're talking about athletic complexes, and that might be something that in the near future, when we talk about potential next steps, obviously we'll be able to identify the tennis courts, and we want to continue with that.
It's a matter of adding a court or two. Also, we lost a tennis court when the high school was built, and we can't host tournaments because we don't have 7 courts. You have to have 7 courts under WIA rules to host a tournament. And we've also, there's the issue of parking, of whether we could, as part of this deal, we could get parking for students along Cold Spring on that tennis court side is something we've also talked about. Not up as far as the houses. The neighborhood is interested in seeing us move on it, but they also understand in past conversations that we don't have the money to move on it, and we won't sell the houses until we have a plan, as Jared said. So.
And so the house that's located in front of the tennis court would be something that would not go on the market. We would most likely, based on some of the preliminary plans, would be raised, and that would be some of the area that we would use for our new tennis courts.
Moving down further.
Yeah. Susan?
Jared, would you, just when there's time, kind of update this PowerPoint so for instance, so that each of these are broken out. It's nice to have this one, but, and to kind of see where the locations are, but then you could see immediately which ones you are thinking about doing a particular thing with.
Okay. Sort of
and
description.
I think that's particular. And the other thing that I don't see here is, so we have each school, and we have the square footage of the school. We don't really have the acreage around it. So, as I recall, Winnebago School has probably the least amount of property surrounding it that would be available for district use.
Yep, no, I can do that.
And then you could see the property where neighborhoods have more property for more use.
Mm-hmm.
And so for instance, we used the field out by Taylor Prairie, and it was large enough then for freshman soccer practice.
Mm-hmm.
So if we know what that space is, then we can say, yeah, it's adaptable for other things, or it's not.
Right.
And the neighborhood then wouldn't allow us to do that. So whenever there's a neighborhood restriction on a particular piece of property, that would be helpful to see that as well.
Sure.
But then we can see these as individual pieces rather than a group of 3.
Nope, not wrong. So that's the houses, the 3 residential houses that are, and they're all vacant. A number of years ago, the house out by Monona Drive is definitely, in order for us to do anything, if we were to resell it, there would be a lot of work. They turned off the water a long time ago. A few animals, it's used for storage right now.
One of the reasons the neighborhood
Yep.
wants us to move.
Now, it's
Yep.
my understanding that as a process of the Long Range Facility Planning Commission, 2, if not all 3 of those were declared to be dilapidated and tear downs, or that's the recommendation. Is that for all?
I would say that only the one house on Monona would be a tear down.
Yeah.
The 2 back here on Jerome Street, obviously there needs to be some work, and then when we do decide to move forward with selling them, we would have another conversation of, do we put some money in to bring them up, or do we sell them as is? But they are in much better condition than the one up by Monona, but they're definitely not move-in ready.
Yeah, I think the recommendation on the committee was to sell them as is.
Yeah.
But those two.
Yeah.
Did the committee support that? There was one individual, there was
If we could let Jared
Right.
proceed with this.
So, like I said, we're on a holding pattern with this, other than continuing that conversation and letting the long-range facility planning process sort of dictates what's happening with the athletic complex, planning fields, before we move forward. But we'll continue to have conversations. Moving on to the lot that I was talking about, that's here. So this is Nichols parking lots. This is the fields that the community uses for soccer. Then there's this bunch of trees. It's a lot on Pheasant Hill Road, and I gave a picture of it from the street view. So if you go past our driveway and take the first left, and then go down, I think it's the 3rd or 4th lot area. It's actually it's an open lot between 2 houses. It's pretty identifiable. So right now, this is zoned separately than the rest, that we don't necessarily need to go. So this would be a property that we would start having conversation on, potentially selling, working with the city of Monona, getting it rezoned to residential. We haven't had any conversation with the city of Monona right now, but we wanted to start this conversation to sort of see how we would go about selling these properties. On this situation, this would be a situation from an administrative point. It wouldn't matter if we went through an RFP to collect a realtor to sell this piece of property, or if we opened up and did sealed bids for this piece, because it's pretty much a standalone property as is. But I think, and we would then be able to take the funds and designate it in our fund balance to keep it separate, to utilize for future building or maintenance, or however the board determines. So there's currently 4 designations that you can make in your fund balance. And we would make the recommendation that any sale of property goes into a committed, where it would be a resolution by the board to put the money there, and a resolution to remove that money, so that if there's any change in board or any change in administration, that money's not necessarily being utilized unless it comes to the board for a full purpose of being able to.
So the recommendation of all of this real property to be sold would be put into a capital account, not to an operational account.
Correct.
That, because even this discussion tonight is starting to make me feel a little uncomfortable with regard to the referendum, because we already have this, now we have acres of property that will solve our budget problem, which is not the case. But I want you to work on it, and I like the way, the direction you're going, but I think we need to make sure that this doesn't imply that if we sold 2 or 3 lots, we got our budget problem solved, which is nothing, because this should go into capital accounts for building or acquisition in the future and that sort of thing.
Right. Because I think the biggest point where I think most people understand is that once you sell the property is gone, and the money that you get is a one-time expenditure, where a referendum is that 2.6 annually, and that's why we need it annually. It's not a one-time, let's fix up a building. In the future, that would be something that we could utilize it, but right now, that's not what the referendum is.
Operational referendum is for boys and girls and teachers and education. And
exactly.
Property is for buildings and grounds and
right.
Okay.
So that accumulates the properties here in Monona. Then as we move to Cottage Grove, you'll see this is Glacial Drumlin, and the Glacial Drumlin property pretty much runs along, which now if you do a Google map, there's all this is all up here,
Yes.
and all this has been built up, but the property pretty much runs right along this, and then goes down along Damascus, comes to County BB, and then right back up here. So it's more of that. This area here is Glacial Drumlin. And I'll go ahead and update the acres and stuff like that, but this is our newest building. Taylor Prairie.
Can you,
Oh.
just at some point in time, can you add whatever that pipe is?
Oh,
Or just a
yeah.
line, so that, because that restricts use, right?
Yeah, because we have a coke oil pipeline that runs through here.
I can't see it.
Yeah,
It's not on.
it's not identified.
It's under the ground.
Underground, and
Corner.
it's just restrictions on what we can utilize that area for. So I will do that. Let me add that.
Just out of curiosity, do you know the acreage that the library has? It's like 6 or 8 acres. I just don't
Yeah,
know
it's
exactly
under
what it-
10 acres.
Right.
And that's located in this,
What is that property zone now? I think that was one of the issues, isn't it?
which property?
The long strip of land,
This over here
yeah.
is agriculture right now.
I can't see where your arrow is.
Oh, sorry, right here?
To the left.
Oh,
To the left of it, or are you referring over here?
I'm referring across the Damascus.
Okay, we'll get to that next.
Oh, excuse me.
Yep, nope. And obviously, Taylor Prairie, school sites, Cottage Grove. Cottage Grove has our school forest. So actually, this all wooded area here that comes down sort of around this cornfield or this agricultural land here is our school forest.
Do you want to just mention that it's deed restricted?
Yes.
If it's not used for a forest, we lose it. So we can't just add on in that location.
So this is the other properties that when we talk about making a recommendation for sale, this is where it would be a recommendation of the administration to probably utilize an RFP to hire a realtor to take care of these properties. And I say that because the property that's at the north parts, as you enter into that new subdivision, is a separate lot. There's actually 2 lots there. They're fairly narrow lots, and so having the ability to potentially rezone those lots to make it 1, or talk with this, the subdivision builders about that. But then down here,
I can't see.
sorry, so the bottom portion, this part here. Does that help, Dean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
now I can see
Perfect.
it.
So this portion down here is all one lot, but it has 10 water and sewer laterals. So it has the potential to be zoned or surveyed into 10 residential lots. And this is why I talk about potentially going to an RFP for a realtor, because I don't think the district, we're not interested in going through the surveying to get those all divided out. We have obviously contractors and developers that have a lot more expertise than the school district does. And so when we talk with the village of Cottage Grove, those are in their plan for residential, in their plan for between 8 and 10 residential houses. So this is where we talk about going to an RFP, hiring a realtor that would work and have connections, and then being able to bring back quotes and recommend or offers, ideally, to the district to be able to do that. I know there was some confusion when we were going through the long-range facility, because there was talk about that before when the district put those up for sale, they were selling those as lots. However, the village of Cottage Road does not have those separated out. And when I talked with them, they would require us to do the surveying in order to do that. And so that's why we would recommend selling, the lot up here, separately, and then this lot
Okay.
all together, because there's 8 to 10 water and sewer laterals, which means that would be surveyed and the ability to do that.
Now, you're talking with much greater authority on this. Now, are you on the Village Planning Commission?
I'm on the CDA with them,
This
the Community Development Authority Court.
Community Development Authority, okay.
Yep. So I'm learning a little bit more about what we
Yeah,
need to do
I-
and stuff.
I- I
That
just-
idea makes sense.
You're much more lucid now than you
Yeah.
were a year ago.
Exactly.
And Jerry,
All right.
can I just mention, again, the people that might not have that history, we did try and sell those before. We did not use a realtor, we used legal counsel, like we used Fahey.
Mhm.
And we did not receive bids for the amount that we'd offered it at. So we rejected those and didn't move forward at that time.
That's from what I've understood as well. And I think that's the other part, that having a realtor that's going to be able to go out, they have their connections, they know who's looking. But the other part of it is when you're looking at developments, the houses that would back up to this new one are established houses. And so, when you're talking about selling lots and an established, they typically like to sell all the lots up front, because if you have, older houses, not everybody want to just come in and put a new house in the middle of two older houses. And so being able to develop that, plus, it's leading into another subdivision. So just having some more expertise that can reach out to people that and have their feelers already out there, and have that relationship with the Village of Cottage Grove to go through the planning process to get things started. Yes, Carrie.
Carrie.
On the long-range facilities planning committee, there was a scheme, is the word I would use, proposed by somebody, and I don't remember exactly how that would work, of the idea of a land swap, that we have this land, and would we want, because of the location of it, would it be valuable to someone else, that we could switch it for something that they have that we want? But
Mhm.
that was sort of thrown out in a passing comment. I don't know if that's even like legal, or if that's something that we would be considering along with the realtor, to
Right.
say, what are the options for this that
Well,
might be valuable to us?
And that's the other, the part that having a realtor that would work for us, because as we potentially look for property in the future for potential new school, not that we don't want to explain to people that it's the school district that's looking at the property, but it does tend to sometimes increase the value. So by having a realtor working on behalf of you, they don't disclose who their client is. They reach out and input. So being able to have someone, so just because we work with a realtor doesn't mean that we're going to put a for sale sign out right away. We would select our realtor, have the conversation, and then see where that goes. And it might be a situation where they reach out and people are not interested, and then we would go for the selling of the property.
Okay, thank you. I'm still getting up to speed on that.
Yep.
And they would definitely be residential in the sense of how the Community Development Authority is
Yep,
already
so the
set that
plan,
up
the
in.
city, or the village has their development plans, and these are listed as residential, so they wouldn't be commercial or.
Okay.
And we did talk about, can the school district utilize this property?
Yeah.
Because when we talk about additional parking, is this a practice field? But based on when we talked to the long-range facility, we didn't foresee that property being able to serve as an additional parking lot. The other part of it is the parking lot might be a little harder to sell with the Village of Cottage Grove and the residents. I mean, people don't have people parking in their back
And
yard.
it doesn't work as a tennis court complex for WIAA tournaments.
Right, you don't
Can't
have
put
that.
7 tennis courts on.
And
So
we
it
can't
looks
put
like you
7
might be
tennis
able
courts there.
to.
If that were in England, it could be 2 bowling greens.
There you go, Dean.
So-
Start a movement.
So tonight, are you looking for direction? I mean, the property that's sort of on the table is this one right here, this
Yes.
discussion right here.
Yep,
And you're looking for some direction from us to move forward,
right.
In terms of how we proceed.
Right. I didn't want to go ahead and issue an RFP and then you guys be like, whoa, we're not ready, especially when we're talking about referendum and other things. And keep in mind that even if we select a realtor, we don't have to necessarily sell the property. I mean, we can still, turn away any bids that come in, or offers that come in.
Susan?
I think it makes sense to proceed with that. I mean, because I think we did spend a lot of time looking at it, and I guess it also occurs to me that if we could sell that property, and then ultimately, it might, and if we use the money for capital, as you were suggesting before, we might have enough to then move with on that high school tennis court project. I mean, that would be really nice if we could do that.
Right.
Because I don't know how else we're ever gonna do that.
Right.
So, anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we actually, at the time of the referendum, we promised that we would sell this property. And, but, I mean, that was part of, actually, what we did, we promised to sell this, we said we'd sell this property and use it to offset costs associated with the construction of Glacial Drumlin, particularly the roads and so on. And I believe that we should be committed to that same purpose. However, if we've already taken money out of general funds to pay for those things, then there isn't any restriction on, if we sell that money, replacing that money essentially in the general fund, and then we're setting aside for other capital projects. But to the extent that it would exceed anything we spend out of the capital funds, it seems to me that our commitment, what we've told the public in the past, which is offset this cost somehow, we would have to find either way to reinvest that money in this property or offset the cost, pay down the debt or whatever that we have accumulated. But I do believe that at the time we decided not to sell these properties and we took money from general funds to do some of the funding for the roads.
When we updated or finished the agreements to the new subdivision, we took that money out of our summer capital budgets. So that came out of general funds. Now, this map doesn't have it on here. But if I go back to GDS, there's one area that we have to keep in mind that I haven't been able to locate it in writing, but I've been told about it. So obviously, before we would proceed on doing it, we'd make sure that we had an agreement. But so just like what happened up here in the northern parts of Damascus when we didn't finish it originally, we also have this area down here in front of GDS. You see there's the sidewalk ends right there. And if this became a development to the west of GDS, we potentially would be required to finish the sidewalk. But the area that I still have in question is that people had talked about, because that's where the 4 lanes end, that we would be responsible for adding the 2 additional lanes. So I haven't seen that because obviously I wasn't here during that part. So we're continuing to look into that. There's no plans right now in the foreseeable future that we have to put that on our radar, but it's something that I learned about, fairly recently. And so it's something that we just want to, right. So I mean, I see the sidewalk concepts. I'm just a little concerned about the road concepts.
Yeah, since we already built.
Right.
And that property is in the town, correct? Across the road?
Half, well.
No, I don't.
South of the road here?
I don't think south of the road is. I think they annexed that in. I think it's when you get past the chiropractor's office there.
Oh, so the town doesn't begin there. So that you think this is the village down here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'll verify that.
Yeah, I thought when we had that issue with the other piece of the road that the line went down the middle of the road.
Did,
part of that section, and that was the part that was east of there, where we built a road that wasn't even contiguous to our property, and half of it was the town, half was the village, was my understanding.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think they just annexed in that.
Oh, okay, so there might have been changes.
I mean, a couple, but I'll verify.
We'd have to look at all that.
Yeah, it used to be town. That's what I was asking.
That's what I was.
If they've annexed it, then they've annexed it.
Yep.
Okay.
So
the direction you need is to proceed, and it sounds reasonable to me to proceed with an RFP. Does anybody have any objections to that? Do we have any comments about that, Dean?
I think what you're discussing with us is fine, but as the chair of the referendum committee and one who's been through this a lot of times, I just as soon not see this discussed because it's going to confuse and distract and that sort of thing. I really think that, if I had to give you advice tonight is enough. and it's because I hope you understand what I'm talking about. We have 10 weeks to go and we have to focus, and we don't need, these are all very real, and I agree with where the direction you're going, but I think just as us trying to get grade configuration has it's not a monkey wrench, but it's but it creates distraction and it creates questions, and there's got to at least be 5 people out there that'll think this is going to yield millions and it'll solve our problem, and you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it won't solve any operational, it won't reduce the class size, it won't pay a teacher, it won't do anything, but it will create distraction. And I think I don't know if the rest of you agree with that, but I think if we want to move forward, we have one objective in my judgment in the next 10 weeks, and we've got to pass this referendum.
And I can tell you that there won't be, I mean, obviously based
There
on
won't
my
be.
task list, the RFP will not be issued until probably at least beyond the referendum.
Yeah.
But at least it gives us the ability to start collecting information.
And my comment would be that I have gotten questions as well, why are you sitting on these properties? You know, and that, you don't need a referendum because obviously because you're sitting on the properties. I think actually that
That's an
wait a minute,
FAQ answer.
I'm
That's
sorry.
an FAQ answer.
Hang on a second, Dean. I think showing that we're moving forward with these with selling these resources is actually a positive thing relative to referendum.
I
It's
I disagree with that as a public, but I think
understand, but
it is a question.
I understand and you disagree with it, but it is a question I've got in the public, and I know some people in the public feel the other way. I don't know in general, but I know some people in the public feel the other way. Susan?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dean, and I don't support your position on this at that time. For 15 years, we've been talking to the community every single time they ask us about why we haven't done something with this property or that property. And the fact is, if we discuss it now, it alludes to building. And that isn't a discussion, we've agreed, I understand, as a board, that isn't a discussion we're gonna have right now. And so until that all comes together, and there's no reason not to do that after the organizational meeting in April, we need to focus on, hello guys, we're sitting at the Monona Grove Education Foundation this morning and we don't even have materials to distribute. We really have to get educated and focused on getting the information on the referendum out. And saying we're gonna do this is fine, and having the presentation, but it's confusing to people that need to hear the words about the referendum. So I'm just saying, if we could wait, that'd be great.
Susan?
I would agree with that, but I also agree with the concern Peter raised,
I do.
and I think this is a good example of the kind of information, because you've reported, but I have been in on a lot of these community
Yep.
discussions about the tennis courts, and when I talk about them, you'll say, well, the whole board hasn't talked about them. Well, now tonight we heard some of this. So to me, this is another example of getting up to speed on, okay, why haven't we sold these properties, and what are we looking about? So that if somebody asks you, you can say that, but you can also point out to them that the sale of a piece of property is one-time money that can only be used for a one-time expense. That's a very important concept to get across, and it's a hard one for people, because you're right, Dean, they'll think, they thought we could get, people think we could get $20 million for this building. Well, we did have one sort of soft offer for 1.5. I mean,
Assessment was
you know,
at
people,
1.5.
so I think it's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's an example of something we have to be able to answer.
Well, Peter made a good point.
Right. I thought-
That if the issue gets raised,
Answer. Right.
it's an FAQ question and response
down bad.
that needs to come out, but it doesn't need to be the center of our focus, because it's often misunderstood. That's my question.
I don't really think that Jared is asking that we make this a center
No,
of
no.
focus. Jared is asking for sort of permission to move forward with the process of generating the RFP. As he stated, this is going to take him some time to do, and I don't think that there's any issue with us giving him permission to move
Not at all.
to move forward with that.
That's not my point, Peter. But my point is that we spent 2 nights doing grade configuration, and we have many people who think that this referendum is in part build a school.
Right.
And that wasn't the part of that, but it was attached to each of the options that we have, and that's the first response that I will get. But I have no objection to everything he's saying.
All right, so the question before us is, Jared really wants our say-so to move forward with the RFP. Does anybody object to him doing that with the time frame that he's laid out?
No, I'm saying, I'm agreeing with Dean, I'm saying, could you just hold your horses for 2 months, Peter? That's all I'm asking, and I don't see you coming and help us with this fact sheet. We're working our tails off on this. This is
Well, that-
really critically important to this district to have them understand why we're going to operational referendum. This discussion, even tonight,
That-
is moderately distracting. It's important, but it's distracting. We could have waited until April after the reorganization meeting. I'm saying, could you just wait?
Well,
I think we're in agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Susan and Dean
Oh.
say no.
Well,
No.
Dean
Saying
said
wait.
no,
No.
no, we're
What do
saying
you
go
s-
ahead, because Jared said he's not gonna be issuing them for a while, so I think that's.
Okay,
I-
can,
what
So let's
I-
see
what
what comes
I-
up.
what I'm
can I have a
saying,
yes or no?
I have a question.
Can I have a yes or no answer to the question? Should Jared proceed with an RFP for these on the timeline that he has laid out, yes or no? Because I don't understand what you're saying.
I have a question first.
oh,
Okay, Jeff, question first.
So, I understand what they're saying. Is it spring the best time to sell these lots?
I mean, typically the market's starting
Because
now.
nobody's gonna
April.
come in May or June and wanna buy
Right.
those lots.
Yeah, you got April and May, well, you got April and May. That's fine.
Right, I think
mean-
I think if we were prepared to sell these May, June timeframe, that would be a
Yeah,
good thing.
I agree,
to
and it's
do.
gonna take that long to do the RFP. is
Right,
what
I
I'm
think
saying, so.
we discussed tonight, if we get an RFP going, it'll fly under the radar for the most part, for most people, I think. And
This is a public meeting, guys.
I'm sure it's a public meeting,
Oh,
there's
geez.
5 people here,
Fly under the
and there's
radar.
not another person in their county watching us, so. So I just think we need to do what's best. If it makes the most sense to sell it in the spring, then we should try to sell it in the spring.
So, again, the question, moving forward on the timeline that,
Peter, I think you have everybody at the table agreeing that what Jared has said is a good plan, good course of attack, but I just want, personally, I think it's important that we keep it off the public discussion, publication, everything like that for 10 weeks.
I
so
agree.
hang on a second.
You haven't heard from everybody.
I know I haven't heard from him, but I'm trying to work out what Dean is telling me because he's saying move yes and.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dean, it's not clear. So
Yes or
Jared
no?
is not supposed to move forward with the RFP until after the referendum. That is your position.
If you do the RFP between now and the next 10 weeks, it will be too public in my judgment.
The RFP is simply to get a realtor involved.
I agree. I
So
agree with
yes or no?
No.
you. No.
Thank you.
If we haven't sold it for
Any-
5 years,
any-
we can save 10 weeks.
Anybody else want to weigh in on it?
Yeah, well, what I
I
would.
think he can proceed with everything.
I would agree, I would say no also, but if you mean actually putting out the RFPs, what I heard Jared say was he's gotta do a lot of work. He just needs the okay to start
move
doing
ahead.
some research, and it's gonna take, I thought, what I heard him say was it would be that long before he'd probably issue the RFPs. So if we say don't issue them till after the referendum, that's fine with me. I think we also need to make it
Exactly.
clear, because we probably do have the Herald Independent paying
Mhm.
attention, that we're not trying to be, there's no attempt to not be transparent here. It
Right.
really is about not wanting to confuse the public about this and wanting to be able to keep it separate from the referendum, because it truly is not a commingled issue, it's a separate issue. Because the money is different,
But
and that
it-
just makes it very complicated, so I don't know, is
Jeff?
that muddy as everyone's.
Jeff? Yeah, we keep muddying the water here, Jeff.
Right, I mean, it's kind of related though, because I would think that having for sale signs up on these properties that we haven't used from the day we bought them shows that we are looking at every possible option to get every nickel we can into our school district.
Mhm.
Still not enough, we still need your help.
So I think the original question was moving forward, Jared moving forward the RFP, which I think we wanted to do. The question is the timeline. He laid out a timeline. It's going to take him time to get there, and it's going to be after the spring
Mhm.
referendum. So that was his
I
original
think
question.
Jared heard
Is-
us.
Is that all right? Okay.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
I agree with everything we said. Just the timeline is the only important thing.
Except, well, okay, fine. Next item on the agenda, future, oh, well, look at this.
That.
Future
Oh, it's
agenda
there,
items. Did you get that?
Yeah.
This actually hasn't updated since our last meeting. Is
Oh,
anything,
God, here we go again.
anything anybody wants to add to this list? It's the
You
same
can
list we
cross
saw
over-
last
You
time
can cross
on.
off another one. HR
Yeah.
job description.
We can move that. That's right.
Put it in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't before the meeting, so it didn't get crossed off. All right, our next meetings.
Peter, don't we need to somehow put on there a board education workshop? Isn't that critical?
Oh,
Am
that,
I missing something?
it's not really an agenda item, it's kind of.
It's not an
it's
agenda
just to
item
set
for
up
our
a
board
meeting.
meetings. It's to set up a meeting. I'll discuss it with Dan as soon as he's back in town, and we'll.
Oh, okay.
We'll do
I
that.
was talking about future meetings.
No.
Do you ever do something that I do sometimes, is add something to your to-do list after you've already done it for the satisfaction of crossing it off? Because, you know, we had.
Those are the only things on my to-do list.
Because we had specifically asked for the summer school report, and I was just looking at this to see if it had been. We asked for the summer school report, and they did, and I
We got it so
appreciated
fast.
the work. We got it so fast, it didn't hit the future agenda items list. But I really appreciated that they turned that around and did that for us. I mean, and in terms of keeping track of what the board has received updates on, that was, I appreciated that they did that. If you were so inclined to add it and turn it green, more power to you.
No.
That was
All right.
really good of them to do
Future
that.
meetings, that's interesting, because it's got today as a future meeting. Tomorrow is the referendum committee, that's here at 4 o'clock, is that right?
Yeah.
In the district office.
4 o'clock tomorrow.
The healthcare committee on the 15th at 3:30, personnel is the 17th at 5:30, and actually next Wednesday is the strategic planning session at the high school at 6 p.m. And then our next board meeting is the 24th at 6 p.m.
By and large, that strategic planning, the part I saw, that went
Well, it
superbly.
went very, very well, I
Really
thought.
good.
We didn't do anything, but we,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn at 8:58.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Before 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Richard.